What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Let's dive right into our first news. The ongoing back and forth between Paddy Pimblett and Arman has heated up once again, with Paddy taking another verbal shot at Arman in Tom Aspinall's latest YouTube video. Paddy downplayed Arman's recent win over Dan Hooker and made it clear that he was not impressed by the performance at all. Paddy admitted that Arman looked good in the fight, but quickly dismissed it by saying almost anyone could look good against Dan Hooker. He claimed that even an amateur with basic grappling knowledge could have had success in that matchup. According to Paddy, anyone in the room who can actually do jiu-jitsu would look good against Dan, because Dan is not known for his ground game. He went on to describe Dan as a pure banger and scrapper, saying he enjoys watching him fight because he brings excitement. However, Paddy insisted that Dan cannot do jiu-jitsu and suggested that this weakness was exposed in the fight. Paddy then focused his criticism back on Arman, arguing that the fact Dan nearly caught him in a guillotine showed how poor Arman's grappling really is. Paddy mocked the situation, pointing out that Arman was briefly stuck in the guillotine and had to rely on flexibility to escape. To Paddy, that moment was a clear sign of vulnerability. He said that while watching the fight, he was thinking that if he ever locked Arman in a guillotine, the fight would be over instantly. He confidently claimed that Arman would go unconscious if put in that position against him, because he would not be able to escape. Paddy finished by saying that watching the exchange left him stunned and even more convinced that Arman's grappling is overrated. The comments add more fuel to an already heated rivalry, with Paddy clearly using the moment to assert his confidence and keep the war of words alive. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to support the channel. Moving on to another news. Merab revealed that he will not be fighting Petr at the White House, and the reason has nothing to do with injuries or timing. Speaking in an interview this week, Merab explained that the UFC has already told him he is next in line for the belt. According to Merab, the promotion also plans to book a trilogy fight between him and Petr. However, he said the UFC made it clear that their matchup cannot take place at the White House event in June because Jan is Russian. As a result, that specific location is completely off the table for their fight. Moving on to another news. Dan Hooker has made it clear that he has no interest in backing down from his increasingly ugly feud with Paddy Pimblett. The two UFC lightweights have been trading deeply personal insults over the past few weeks, and Hooker says there is no turning back after what has been said. The bad blood escalated after Paddy took the first shot, delivering an extremely harsh comment about Dan's grappling ability. Hooker fired back by accusing Paddy of being fake, claiming that he had been friendly to his face during a previous meeting, only to completely switch up afterward in public interviews. Things then crossed into far more personal territory when Hooker referenced Ricky, a close friend of Paddy's who died by suicide. Paddy accused Hooker of crossing a serious line, but from Hooker's perspective, he was simply responding with the same energy. Speaking to Combat TV, Dan said the comment was deliberate and meant to provoke a reaction. He summed it up bluntly by saying that if someone wants to go low, he is willing to go even lower. According to Hooker, Paddy tried to get a reaction and succeeded, while fans are already calling for a fight between the two. Both men are currently focused on other opponents. Paddy is set to face Justin Gaethje for an interim lightweight title in the main event of UFC 324 in Las Vegas. Meanwhile, Hooker is preparing for his own high-stakes matchup against Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC 325 the following weekend. Despite their separate paths for now, Hooker made it clear that the feud is far from over. He admitted that Paddy's words genuinely affected him and said there is no chance of squashing the beef anytime soon. Hooker explained that when someone says something truly disgusting, he will respond in kind. He added that the anger is now mutual and there is no coming back from it. In his mind, the situation has reached a point where the only real resolution would be inside the cage. And until then, the hostility is here to stay. Moving on to another news, Plessis' coach has spoken out after the UFC 319 title loss, placing the blame on Khamzat's suffocating wrestling style and what he described as poor officiating. The fight took place last August in Chicago, and according to coach Morne Visser, they were ready for almost everything, except an opponent who had no intention of engaging in a traditional fight. Visser admitted that small mistakes added up over the course of all 5 rounds and ultimately cost them the belt. He described those mistakes as easy fixes, but also made a surprising confession. He said the team was simply not prepared to fight someone whose only goal was to hold position and avoid exchanges. If they had known that Khamzat would rely entirely on that approach, Visser said they would have completely changed Du Plessis's game plan. According to him, they would have abandoned striking altogether and focused purely on wrestling exchanges, something he believes Du Plessis is more than capable of handling. Visser also took issue with the refereeing, suggesting the fight should have been stood up multiple times. In his view, Khamzat did not want to fight and was allowed to stall far too easily, despite acknowledging that wrestling is part of MMA. Visser was blunt about what happened. He said it looked like they had no answers on the ground and openly admitted they did not know how to deal with a blanket style at the time. However, he promised that would never happen again. Visser claimed Khamzat has zero chance with Du Plessis on the feet or in the clinch, insisting that his only path to victory was holding him on the floor for 25 minutes. He credited Khamzat for executing that plan well, but made it clear the rematch would look very different. Despite early talk of an immediate rematch, both Du Plessis and Khamzat remain unbooked, leaving the rivalry unresolved for now. Moving on to another news, Justin Gaethje made it very clear that he has violent intentions heading into his fight with Paddy Pimblett at UFC 324, and he did not hold back when describing his mindset. Justin said his goal is to drag Paddy into the later rounds, where fatigue becomes a major factor and experience takes over. According to Justin, everything comes down to cardio. He explained that once an opponent is tired, he feels he can do whatever he wants to them inside the cage. That is the position he is trying to reach in this fight. He pointed to past matchups, including the Feziev fight and the Chandler fight, as examples of how dangerous he becomes when fights go deeper. Justin added that those opponents were fortunate their fights were only 3 rounds. In his words, if those matchups had been scheduled for 5 rounds, he believes he would have hurt them badly. That same mentality is what he is bringing into this fight, as he said he specifically wants to take Paddy into the championship rounds. He repeatedly emphasized that he wants to hurt Paddy badly, making it clear this is not just about winning a decision or scoring a quick finish. Justin said he is genuinely excited for the opportunity and cannot wait to step into the cage with him. He described the matchup as something that fuels him on a primal level. Justin also revealed that his mental preparation has been intense. He said he has been telling himself that the fight is going to hurt, pushing his mind into the darkest and most aggressive place possible. According to him, when he reaches that state, he becomes one of the most dangerous fighters in the world. He finished by saying his preparation has been 100%, both physically and mentally. Justin sounded confident, focused, and fully committed to imposing his will over 5 rounds, making it clear that he sees this fight as a chance to do serious damage and make a statement at UFC 324. Moving on to another news, Matt Damon shared a memorable and surprisingly insightful story about accidentally running into Henry Cejudo, without realizing at first that he was standing next to one of the most dangerous fighters on the planet. Appearing this week on the Joe Rogan Experience, Matt explained how our minds often create exaggerated caricatures of what tough people are supposed to look like, especially when it comes to MMA fighters. He said that many people imagine fighters as loud, intimidating, hyper-aggressive figures, but in reality, a lot of them turn out to be some of the kindest and most down-to-earth people you could ever meet. Matt recalled attending a UFC event in Los Angeles, believing it was at Staples Center, where he was backstage talking to one of the UFC's lawyers. At the time, they were discussing Conor and hearing a great story about him. While Matt was focused on the conversation, a man casually walked up wearing khaki pants, a blue button-up shirt, glasses, and an overall business casual look. He was small, quiet, and completely unassuming. Matt admitted that he barely paid attention to him at first, as nothing about the guy screamed elite fighter. Then suddenly, someone said, "Matt, do you know Henry?" Matt turned around and realized the man standing next to him was Henry Cejudo. That was the moment it hit him. Matt joked that this was a guy who could absolutely wreck him without breaking a sweat. He pointed out that Henry looks like the kind of person that an ignorant troublemaker might try to pick on, simply because he does not carry himself with any kind of outward toughness or aggression. Henry was calm, polite, and relaxed, which only made the contrast more striking. Matt and Joe then reflected on how often the truly dangerous people are the most peaceful ones. Joe compared it to elite military operators, explaining that the loud, macho bravado people associate with toughness is usually a sign of insecurity. The most secure individuals, the ones who have nothing to prove, tend to be calm, friendly, and genuinely nice. Matt agreed, adding that his experiences with fighters and highly trained individuals have shown him the same pattern again and again. He said it almost feels beautiful in a way, meeting someone who could easily dominate you physically, yet chooses kindness and humility instead. He even joked that Henry could probably take his watch if he wanted, and Matt would hand it over without hesitation. The conversation wrapped up with Matt reflecting on how stories like this challenge our assumptions about strength and character. Moving on to another news. Anik shared an interesting take on why he believes there should be fewer fights on UFC events, and his reasoning sparked a lot of discussion among fans. Speaking on the Spinning Backfist MMA show, Anik explained that the biggest challenge facing the UFC right now is the length of its events. According to him, the cards have simply become too long to sustain, especially for fans who try to watch every weekend. Anik said that instead of stacking cards with 15 fights, the UFC should aim for 10 or 11 fights per event. He added that even if a broadcast ran for 5 or 6 hours, he would be completely fine with that, especially compared to the current 8-hour marathons. He pointed out that the promotion is asking a lot from its audience, including the most hardcore fans, by expecting them to commit to 8-hour shows across roughly 41 Saturdays every year. He acknowledged that the UFC has many different interests to balance, including television partners across multiple countries and the logistics of managing such a massive organization. With a roster of over 600 fighters and around 50 new signings coming in every year through the Contender Series, Anik suggested that the system has become overloaded. In his view, that model is far from ideal. If he had the power to make one major change, Anik said he would cut around 150 fighters from the roster. He believes that trimming the roster and limiting cards to 10 fights would create a more digestible and palatable sporting event. From a broadcaster's perspective, he also admitted that it feels like calling back-to-back Super Bowls every time he sits down with a microphone, which only adds to the strain. Overall, Anik's comments highlight a growing concern that less might actually be more when it comes to UFC events, both for fans and for the people behind the scenes. Moving on to another news, Justin Gaethje reflected on a difficult chapter of his career just days before stepping into the octagon to face Paddy Pimblett for the interim lightweight title in the main event of UFC 324. While his focus is firmly on Saturday night in Las Vegas, 2 past losses are still fresh in his mind. Justin looked back on his 2022 title fight against Charles Oliveira and his 2024 loss to Max Holloway, explaining that both fights came with very different circumstances. Against Charles, Justin was fighting for the vacant lightweight belt after Charles missed weight and was stripped of the title. A win would have made Justin the undisputed champion, but the fight ended quickly with a submission loss in the first round. Justin admitted that he was not at his best going into that bout. He revealed that just 18 days before the fight, he was involved in a serious bicycle crash where he hit his head on the road. According to him, he walked into the fight compromised, even though he chose not to make excuses at the time. He then addressed the loss to Max, which came while he was defending the BMF title. Justin said that fight was more of a mindset failure than a physical one. He admitted he treated it like a spectacle or a fun fight and failed to fully recognize the danger he was in. Because of that, he never reached his primal, competitive state, something he believes is essential to his success. Justin described that night as scary, saying he remembered Max's face clearly, something that had never happened to him before in a fight. He believes mistakes were made throughout the preparation, leading to the wrong mindset and ultimately the knockout loss in the final second of the fight. That experience is the main reason he wants a rematch with Max in the future. Now, against Paddy, Justin has the opportunity to become a interim UFC champion. At 37 years old, he previously won the interim title in 2020 with a dominant win over Tony Ferguson. Later that year, he failed to unify the belts after losing to Khabib, but this weekend represents another chance to rewrite his legacy and prove he has learned from those painful lessons. Moving on to another news, Tom Aspinall's teammate has spoken out about what he described as absolute horrible treatment the UFC heavyweight champion received following the controversial eye poke that ended his last fight. Tom Aspinall is expected to undergo surgery on his eye, and there is currently no clear timeline for when he might return to competition. Tom became one of the most popular fighters on the UFC roster after winning an interim title on short notice, defending that belt without hesitation, while Jon Jones waited to face an aging Stipe Miocic and delivering a series of brutal performances that saw him tear through the heavyweight division. However, his first defense as undisputed champion did not go as planned. A competitive opening round against Ciryl Gane came to a sudden stop after Tom suffered a severe eye poke. With his vision compromised, the fight was called off. Despite medical reports confirming the seriousness of the injury and the need for surgery, Tom has faced a wave of backlash online. Some fans accused him of using the eye poke as an excuse to avoid continuing a fight he may have been losing. His longtime friend and teammate, Modestas Bukauskas, admitted the criticism deeply bothered him, especially given how often Tom has stepped up for the UFC. Modestas said he felt terrible seeing the reaction online, pointing out that Tom has always been a company man. He reminded fans that Tom took a dangerous fight against Sergey Pavlovich on just 2 weeks' notice, waited patiently for Jon Jones, and consistently delivered highlight finishes, often within the first round. To Modestas, it was unfair how quickly people forgot all of that because of one unfortunate injury. Drawing from his own experience, Modestas explained how damaging eye pokes can be. He revealed that he once suffered blurry vision for nearly a year after repeated eye injuries, and emphasized how serious Tom's situation was. He described the poke as extremely deep and said it was unreasonable to expect anyone to continue fighting under those conditions. Modestas also explained why continuing the fight made no sense. As champion, Tom was facing one of the most dangerous strikers in the division. Ciryl Gane is fast, long, and highly technical, and fighting him with impaired vision would have been reckless. He called the backlash absolutely horrible, but believes it may end up fueling Tom's return. Tom has since confirmed he will need surgery and additional treatment, including injections, to repair the damage. Modestas said eyes are incredibly delicate and recovery can take a long time, especially when dealing with complications like retinal damage. Despite everything, Modestas believes this ordeal will only make Tom more dangerous. He said the criticism has given him a chip on his shoulder and warned that when Tom returns, he will come back with even more intensity. According to him, questioning Tom's integrity has only amplified the switch inside him, and whoever stands across from him next is going to face a truly terrifying version of the champion. That's it from MMA Pulse News. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for your daily dose of MMA news.